Hello and welcome to Pocket Gamer.biz's weekly news digest. This is for the week ending the 6th of March 2015. So, kind of big things happening this week. In some sense, kind of physical big things. Obviously, GDC, the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, has been happening. I've been there many times in the past, not been for the last couple of years for various reasons, but been lots of Pocket Gamer activity there. We've had our party, and we've had our awards, and we've had our drink up, and we've had our very big indie pitch as well. And our news editor Alicia has been running around interviewing people and going to sessions and kind of getting a kind of view on kind of what's going on on the ground, kind of what people are saying. And I kind of think as a I guess we're a news channel to a degree on Pocket Gamer.biz, and it's kind of interesting to be able to see both views. So certainly when you're at GDC, you're running around the entire time. You've got meetings probably every half an hour. You're dashing from hotel to conference centre to wherever. You're probably a bit jet lagged, probably not eating very well, and by the end of the week you're quite tired and want to go home. So in some degrees I'm glad I'm not doing that this year. I'm sure I will be doing it in the future. But it's interesting to, I guess, get a more editor's view, really, sitting back in the UK and kind of seeing all the press releases and kind of doing some briefings with people via Skype about what's going on. And I guess everyone who goes to the show has a kind of different kind of view of what the trends are, kind of in terms of what they're seeing. I don't think in the moment kind of GDC is a show really for mobile that kind of breaks out trends. I think it's a continuation of kind of what we've been seeing in the past. So from that point of view, I don't think there's anything kind of amazing kind of news that's kind of arisen from that. But there are kind of, I guess, some interesting kind of bits and bobs we can kind of put together. And I guess that's what trends is to a degree. So there's one interesting kind of, I guess, as GDC, as has been in the past, was a lot about technology, a lot about tools companies. Certainly when I used to go in the early 2000s, it was a lot about engines. Engines don't really matter so much anymore, but obviously people are still using engines, and they are just a well-recognised part of the ecosystem now. And I guess there was something for us journalists to kind of play off in the way we love to do, kind of companies battling against each other or wars against versus whatever. So two things just to briefly kind of go through was Epic announced kind of a change to licensing for its Unreal Engine. So obviously Unreal Engine has been going for decades now, or at least over a decade. It's on Unreal Engine 4, and they, in the days of consoles and PCs, they were the strongest player. But as gaming development has kind of fragmented it, particularly mobile platforms, that's Freudian, wasn't it? Epic was never set up, but to have Unreal really working for mobile or lightweight technologies, and they have to do a lot of work. They've done a lot of work to kind of get that working, because that's now clearly where the majority of the market is. But markets is not just about how good your technology is; it's also about your support and about your pricing and about other things. I guess you could call them like kind of soft features, really. And Epic, to really surprise people, it's been playing around with its pricing for a while. And GDC announced it was going to an upfront free fee. Can you have a free fee? I don't know. But basically, anyone can get Unreal Engine 4 now for free. And how they're going to monetize it from their point of view is a bit more complicated. So for every quarter that you run a live product, you'll pay them a 5% royalty, and you'll get a certain amount of kind of money up front, or a certain amount of revenue, $30,000 free up front. Then they take a revenue share of 5% off the back of that. So in a sense, that's kind of how the model has been worked in the past. You have been able to do a royalty model. Quite difficult to know how you actually police that. In terms of a lot of these small companies, they're not going to give you presumably their access into their Apple account. But anyway, it's I guess a significant move from Epic, just to kind of get market share back again, because a lot of people were just saying it's too expensive to just get access to the technology to see if you want to use it. Unity, Unity is by far and away the biggest player in the technology market. It's over 1 million individuals using it. So it hasn't really changed its model to that degree. It has kind of subtly shifted how it kind of presents its technology. So Unity 5 was announced, as you'd expect. It's got all the usual kind of graphical updates and kind of rendering and texturing and physics and animation and all that kind of stuff. It's got new cloud builds, got team tools, various kind of things that developers love to say make them more productive and make their games look nicer. But what it's done is it's kind of split out its technology now. So there's a free version. They've always had a free version, and now that's kind of the personal edition. So it doesn't have some of the kind of top end tools that you would need if you were a professional developer, really. And then there's the professional edition, and that costs $75 per seat per month. So anyone who's using Unity pays that. So much of a muchness. If you talk to those kind of companies, Epic and Unity, they still kind of argue they're not really in direct competition. To a degree, they probably are, but there's still probably the majority of game developers still use their own technology. So there's still, I guess, a big market, and certainly in places like Asia, there's other companies. There's like Cocos 2DX, very big in China and in Asia as well. So that's, I guess, a traditional GDC story. Another interesting story, I guess, not to do with GDC, but announced at GDC was Storm8. So fairly well recognised social mobile publisher, developer really, from the US. It announced 1 billion downloads of its games. So 1 billion downloads is obviously a lot of downloads of its games. I guess what's kind of interesting about Storm8 is it doesn't really have a signature kind of game. So we've obviously other companies have done 1 billion downloads. So there's been 1 billion downloads of Angry Birds, but that was, no one necessarily really knew that was Rovio. That was Angry Birds you were downloading. I mean, Storm8's the other way around. It has games that obviously been downloaded hundreds of millions of times, but they're not really stand out in a way that Angry Birds is. And basically, the reason it does that, it always says it's going for a network approach. So it has about 45 live games on the App Store, which is an awful lot. Obviously, some of them don't have that many users, but the whole point for Storm8 is it releases games. Still talking about kind of a couple every month. And still plans to do that, and it wants to just build its network. So the network's the most important thing. Once it's got a player in the network, it can kind of cross-promote its own games, and that's how it's got to 1 billion downloads, which is, as we say, is quite a lot of downloads. So I'm going to check my cheat notes. Right, okay. So two other things that kind of caught my eye really, and it's not really to do with news so much as just how people are looking at the market. So just mentioning Rovio. So actually not at GDC, but there's another conference called Mobile World Congress, which is in Barcelona, which is much more about handsets and kind of base stations and kind of the infrastructure of mobile, not really so much in mobile games, although it has attempted in the past. Foolishly, it scheduled itself with GDC this year, which wasn't so clever. But anyway, Peter Westerbacker, who's he's the mighty eagle from Angry Birds. He's their chief marketing officer, and he gave a speech. And it's, in a sense, it's nothing we've not heard from Rovio before, but he was saying that brand clearly is massively important for Rovio. Rovio is not a games company, it's an entertainment company. Yeah, we've heard that before. But something that kind of I like, because I've been banging on about it for a while, is he says we don't talk about users. So often in the industry we talk about daily active users. No one talks about daily active players, but if you're a games company, you don't have users, you have players. And the same thing that Peter was saying, we don't have users, we never use the term users, we don't use the term customers, we don't have customers, we have fans. So obviously they're saying they're not a games company, so they're not saying they have gamers, they're saying they're an entertainment company, they have fans. And I kind of thought that's just kind of a nice way of kind of looking at things. I think it's something, terminology doesn't necessarily change how successful your games are, but I think it's kind of a good process to go through and think about how you're communicating what the kind of passions and the vision of your company is. And in a similar way, we spoke to the CEO of MAG Interactive, which, I mean, they're a fairly small Swedish publisher, but their famous game is Ruzzle, which is a word game. And they were talking about when they first launched that word game, they kind of actively went out to find gamers. They were like, we're a games company, we're going to go and find gamers to play our word game. And obviously gamers don't really like word games. They might occasionally play word games, but more likely playing strategy games or shooter games. So they kind of worked out they needed to kind of their market, even though people were playing their games at very high levels of retention, they didn't see themselves as gamers. This is something that a lot of casual companies talk about, of course. I guess Zynga back in the day was a classic one. People who played, and I guess King to a degree as well, people who played Candy Crush don't see themselves as gamers, even though they're playing a lot of games and potentially paying in a lot of games. So the Razzle guys were saying, we find gamers as a category very fickle. You can get them to download your game, but next week they've downloaded someone else's game. It's very hard to keep them in your kind of ecosystem in your game. Whereas non-gamers, because they're not gamers, not looking for other games, you get them into your game, they have some ridiculous proportion of the people who first downloaded Ruzzle, I think 3 years ago, 10% are still playing the game after 3 years, and that's because it's a social game you play against your kind of real life friends. And again, that's just another interesting way of looking at it. I think often, well, certainly for the last 18 months, we've had a lot of people talking about mid-core and mid-core gaming, mid-core mobile gaming. No one really seems exactly sure what a mid-core game is compared to a casual game or a hardcore game. And certainly no one really seems to have found a kind of strong audience or a strong reservoir of this kind of mid-core audience who are a bit more hardcore than casual audience and a bit more like to pay, but not hardcore. Anyway. So moving on to the other kind of big thing, at least for PocketGamer.biz this week, was we announced our top 50 developers of 2015. So that's something that's been going on for 6 years. It's a bit of a kind of labour of love for us to kind of try and kind of chunk down all the developers in the world. Obviously, there's kind of millions of them now, really. And so we kind of look to see kind of kind of ranking them all against each other, and in looking at things like financial performance for the companies we can see that for, looking at just the quality of the games really. I mean, that's kind of what it boils down to. Obviously looking at kind of public sources, looking at how much interaction we've had with studios and what we know about them. But basically it boils down to how good we think their games are. And that gives us our kind of basis for how we work out our top 50 developers. So I'm sure you've seen that on the site. That will be on the site for the whole of the year until we do one next year. And I hope to see you next week, and we'll talk about some more news. Thank you.